and I make more money and do better for me and my children if you are constantly checking to make sure that I'm not? May that make sense? Welcome to the Happy and Healed Money Podcast, brought to you every week with your girl, Starr Carter. Don't forget to like and subscribe and cut on your notifications. That way you never miss out on brand new content that's coming to you every week. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into today's topic. I want to welcome you to the third episode of the Happy and Healed Money Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're not already a subscriber to my YouTube channel, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you like this video, this podcast episode video. And guys, make sure that you leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts and your feels on today's topic. That way this video also get pushed out to other people that might need to get this information. And I do appreciate all the love. So again, I do welcome you here to the third episode, and as I did in my previous two episodes, we're going to say the serenity prayer, because when we cover deep topics like this, I want to make sure that we are covering ourselves with peace, love, and that we're coming from a space of not just information, but also from a space of where I've been there. And so I'm not talking from a place of privilege. I'm talking from a place of I've been there and I was able to overcome. And so I want you all to be able to do the same. If you're still in a situation or however it is with your finances, I want you to know that you have a auntie over here that is rooting for you and cheering for you. And so therefore I want to come from a space of love. So we're going to say the serenity prayer. So let's say it together. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So I know you've probably seen the headlines and other YouTube videos that's already come out about this topic, about Section 8 and the Trump administration, the White House and the budget cuts that they're talking about implementing in 2026, because the budget for this year, 2025, has already been approved by Congress. So if this proposed change is to take effect, it will not go into effect to 2026. So let's briefly talk about that first before I get into the full topic of this Section 8 video. So I'm going to be reading this information from my iPad right here. So it says President Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposal includes significant changes to federal housing assistance, particularly the Section 8 program. So here's a breakdown. Proposed cuts and structural changes. Major funding reductions. The budget proposes a $33.6 billion, and that's approximately 44% cut to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, including a $26.7 billion reduction in rental assistance programs such as Section 8 vouchers, public housing, and housing for the elderly and disabled. Transition to state-managed block grants. The proposal aims to replace federal rental assistance with state-controlled block grants, allowing states to design and administer their own housing assistance program. A 2-year cap on rental assistance is proposed for adult able-bodied without disabilities, with the exceptions for elderly and disabled individuals. Elimination of key HUD programs. The budget seeks to eliminate programs such as the Community Development Block Grant and the Home Investment Partnership Program, which support affordable housing development and rehabilitation efforts. This has been a major topic of discussion, especially on TikTok, and I've seen several thumbnails for it on Section 8 on here on the YouTube space. I haven't actually looked at any of the YouTube videos, but I have looked at some of the people who have talked about it on TikTok. And there's an interesting point of view for everybody that has made their comment or their perspective known. Some people are upset about it, of course, and some people are happy about it. So there's always going to be a mixed bag of perspectives whenever it comes down to how do you view Section 8? Do you view Section 8 as a economic benefit for the communities that it serves, or do you look at it as a poverty trap? Because that topic has also came up, that has Section 8 created a poverty trap for the Black and brown community? So let's talk about that part. Now, on the Happy and Healed Money podcast, I like to talk about things that I have been affected by and that I have overcome in whatever way and however I was able to overcome those obstacles that was financial. Okay, so that's where I want to come from in this perspective when I give my own perspective of this Section 8 issue right now. So as I told you guys in my second episode of the Happy and Healed Money podcast, that I was a welfare child. My grandma raised me, but we all lived in a row house in Baltimore where I grew up at. And it was 9 of us in that house, but my grandmother was disabled. She was a nurse. She got hurt on the job and she became disabled. She had like 9 back operations, so she could not work. And she was my guardian, even though my mother was a part of my life, my whole life, up until she passed away in 2011. But I've always known my mom. I always had a relationship with my mom. But when I was younger, it was more of a sisterly relationship more than a mother and a daughter, because I always looked at my grandmother as my mom because she was the one that did more of the disciplinary when it came to raising me. Okay, so I didn't get, my grandmother got food stamps and welfare benefits for my behalf, and because she was disabled. Now we talking about the 80s, right? We talking about the 80s, and we wasn't on any Section 8 housing then, but when we moved here to South Carolina, we did get on Section 8 housing. And so my grandma being disabled and having me, she qualified, and I was 11, I think, going on 12 when we moved here. And so she qualified for Section 8. Of course, I wasn't working. I wasn't old enough to work. And so we was able to get housing through that. Now, granted, the first apartments that we moved in was a horrible neighborhood, roach infested, crime infested, you name it. And then eventually, after about living there 2 years after we moved from Baltimore, living in that place for 2 years, we was able to get a voucher to move to a better neighborhood, better apartments, and thank God didn't have any roaches and didn't have any of those rodents and that kind of stuff. And it was a lot better neighborhood. But I do remember the inspections, you know, making sure that this and this and that, and that there's no man in the house, and you know, all those different things that I just remember as a young adult about to be in and as a teenager, because I moved out on my own when I was 19 years old. And that's because when I graduated high school, instead of me going directly into college, I went in, was working, which I started working when I was 16. And my grandma always feared that my Burger King job when I turned 16 would it affect the Section 8 housing that we lived in, because they count your income. They look at all the income that comes into the household. So it was one of those things where it limits you to what you can do with your income. So that's where we come to the poverty trap that I'm gonna talk about in a little bit more, a little bit further down in this video. So when I bring this information, I don't bring it from a place of I've never experienced it. I have experienced being on Section 8. I have experienced my family being on Section 8, because when my aunt got disabled, she was on Section 8. When my mom became disabled, she was on Section 8. So I had generations in my family that was on Section 8 as well because of disability and not being able to work full-time jobs anymore. So my aunt, she had osteoarthritis that crippled her. So she was working at a hospital doing like hospitality type work until she couldn't. And so she had to become dependent on Section 8 to help bridge the gap with the rent and housing. And then my mother, she got disabled. She had a liver issue that caused her to almost pass away when I was 16, and gratefully the liver repairs itself, and so she was able to get back right. So she was only on Section 8 for a small amount of years before she was able to go back to work. So she wasn't completely disabled forever on the program. So she was able to go back to work and was able to contribute to full rent. But then around the time that she passed in 2011, she wound up having to go back on a type of housing assistant, but it was more for people that had terminal like illness. So she had real bad COPD, real bad emphysema, chronic bronchitis, I meant to say, because of years of smoking. She started smoking when she was young. So she had a lot of those issues, and that's what she passed away from. And so she was on a type of housing assistance then that was for people, because my mom was she wasn't quite 60. She was in her mid 50s when she passed away. So she also was on some form of housing assistance after the COPD had eventually caused her to not be able to work anymore, because she was on full blown. She had to be on oxygen 24/7. And so I know the stigma of it, put it like that. I know the stigma of it, and I know the negativity that surrounds it, because like I said, when we moved down here from Baltimore, and we lived in that roach infested place with all the crime and the shooting and the drugs and all that, and it seems like when it comes to a lot of the Section 8 housing, that's what ends up being, it be a lot of those type of areas. And not saying that all, but I'm just saying it seems to be that way. That was our experience until we were able to move to a better apartment complex that was a lot better school in the area and that kind of thing, lot less crime and all those type of things, and you could really tell the difference, But at the same token, by the time we moved out, that area had started to become a bad area, because at first it wasn't Section 8 housing and it became Section 8 housing. So as more Section 8 families came in, and I'm not saying this to be negative, I'm just saying this to tell the truth, that a lot of crime would follow, because some of the kids that came, and I'm not talking about small kids, I'm talking about people who have kids that were my age, 15 to 16, and that were doing illegal stuff in the apartment complex, selling dope, doing, with all types of, violent crimes and all that kind of stuff. So eventually that apartment complex didn't become as safe as it was when we first moved in. And it seems like I said, it seems like that becomes a trend. And so this comes to my point of, do you see Section 8 in its entirety? Unless you are disabled, unless you are elderly, like my grandma had became elderly, and my aunt and my and my mom, to the point where they couldn't work anymore. If you are able-bodied, do you believe, and I want you to leave me a comment, do you believe that this creates a poverty trap? So I'm gonna pull up some more points about this, okay, to defend my point. So let's talk about the ethnic groups that benefit the most from this program. So let's look at that. So Section 8 housing assistance, created under the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974, was designed to help low-income families, the elderly, and people with disabilities afford safe and decent housing in the private market. Over time, the program have served people across various racial and ethnic backgrounds. However, data shows that certain groups have historically benefited more in terms of program participation rates due to socioeconomic disparities. So here's a breakdown. Black/African American households, largest beneficiary group in most urban areas. So it's saying that Black people, we benefit more from this Section 8. Largest group in most urban areas. As of recent HUD data, this is 2023, about 43% to 45% of Section 8 voucher recipients are Black. Disproportionate representation is due to higher poverty rates, housing discrimination, and historical barriers to wealth and home ownership. So we all know about the redlining that occurred during Jim Crow time, even all the way up. I mean, there was redlining all the way up through I mean, historically, you could see that occurred even through the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I mean, it was still that going on. And it depends on where you live. You might even experience it now, because there are some communities that do not want black people in there. And it's just, let's be real about it. Okay, so that says white non-Hispanic households represent about 35 to 38% of voucher holders nationally. Many are elderly or disabled individuals in rural and suburban areas. Their participation is more evenly spread across regions. So white people represent 35 to 38, and many are more elderly or disabled. Okay. So Hispanic and Latino households represent about 15 to 20% of Section 8 recipients, depending on the region. Participation has grown over time, especially in areas with large Latino populations like California, Texas, and Florida. Language barriers, documentation status, and local outreach can affect access, okay? So Asian and Pacific Islander households make up a small percentage of recipients, typically 2 to 4%. Participation is higher in places like California and Hawaii. Access may be influenced by immigration patterns and cultural factors. All right, Native American households represent less than 1 to 2% of Section 8 recipients nationally. Many are served under separate tribal housing programs like the Indian Housing Block Grant. Geographic isolation and housing stock issues on reservations often limit participation. So black households have benefited the most in terms of overall representation in the program. So when we think about the wealth gap that is unfortunately plaguing the black community, and this gap has even followed us until today, even though there are many, many, many of us that are way more prosperous than we were in the times of my grandmother that was born in the 1920s, and she had to grow up during the Jim Crow era. My mom that was born in 1952, and as a child that was right on the cusp of all the civil rights things. So she grew up in the civil rights era. I was born in 1978, so I was born in the turnaround where it seems like they wanted to correct their wrongs by giving these programs, because they know historically black people always got paid way less than the white counterparts, and they might be doing the same job, and you might have a white person that barely got a high school diploma doing this job, and you might have a black person that got a high school diploma, might even had some college, and they were getting paid less than the white person that did not have even a high school diploma. And so those economic disparities went into, even if you were able-bodied and was working 40 plus hours a week, you still could not afford to have a decent place to live because of redlining, because of rent gouging. You had a lot of areas, especially after the Great Migration, where a lot of the black people moved up north because of all the harsh treatment that was going on in the South. We're talking about lynching and all those type of terrible things that happened to our ancestors that caused them to go north, because they were told that there was a better opportunity, better jobs, and all those type of things, just to live worse than what they were, minus the threat of the violence. You know, I'm not saying that it wasn't any, but it wasn't as bad as it was in the South. But a lot of them found themselves being in a worse off situation than they were in the South when they went to the North. And so they worked even harder and got less, because the cost of living up north, and it still is, the cost of living in the northern states are usually higher than the cost of living in the southern states. So it's always been one of those things where I feel like our ethnic group have always tried to play catch up to a system that was never set up for us to win. Now, with that being said, there has been a lot of us, even during that time, that was able to overcome those obstacles. I am happy to say that in my generation, In my family, as I told you, my grandmother had to get it, my aunt had to get it, my mom had to get it. I praise God that I never, ever had to apply for Section 8 housing. Never. And so I was able to stop the generational passing down of this, because it does happen. We're not going to sit here and act like it doesn't happen in a lot of our black families, where grandma was on it, mama was on it, and now the child is, the daughter is on it, and then their children, they get old enough, they might get on it, and it looks like instead of us passing real generational wealth, we're passing this poverty trap, and like I said, I'm not saying this to be ugly, I'm saying this to be real, and it's up to us to stop it. It's up to, like I told you guys in another video, it's up to us to stop the things that we see that has caused us to not be where we need to be, right? And so I had put in the chat GPT, I said, what are some of the stipulations of Section 8 programs that has contributed to the wealth gap of Black American recipients of this program that are not elderly or disabled? Okay, so we're going to exclude the disabled and the elderly. We're going to exclude those. It says, here are several key stipulations and structural issues that contribute to this outcome. So number one, income limits and benefit cliffs. So disincentives to earn more. So you're not encouraged to make more money, because if you make more money and they're counting your income, guess what? You're at a risk of losing your voucher, of losing your housing. Because if you make over whatever that threshold amount is, now they're saying you make too much money, but at the same time, you don't make enough money to pay the full rent. So you're stuck in a rock and a hard place. And it says Section 8 requires recipients to pay about 30% of their income toward rent. If income rises, so does the rent obligation, or they may lose the voucher altogether. Wealth stagnation. This discourages participants from pursuing higher paying jobs or promotions, effectively trapping them at lower income levels to avoid losing housing support. So this right here, as it disguises itself as an economic benefit, but if you're an able-bodied person, you just may have 1 or 2 or 3, 4 kids. Now you are stuck at only being able to make this income cap. Your income is capped just because you need an affordable place to live, which is going to discourage you from getting a higher paid job, or even going back to school to get a higher paid job. It's going to discourage that because you're scared of losing what you already have. Nobody wants the fear of being homeless while you're trying to get your finances on track, and you're trying to get that leg up. So this program does not help you get a leg up, because I feel like this, if the program really was going to help you, it would say, hey, you could be on the program for whatever set amount of time, and during that time, they should not look at your income. They should give you an opportunity to do better, because you can't do better if they steady checking to see if you're trying to get over on the system, if you're trying to do something that's gaming the system, right? So let's look at this other part. It says restrictions on home ownership. So that's number 2. Section 8 does offer a home ownership voucher program, but it is underutilized and has strict criteria, long wait times, and limited support. Most participants, remain renters for life, missing out on the key wealth building opportunity of home ownership, a major factor in the Black-white wealth gap. So we know that home ownership has not always been available to us because of redlining. So when there was that great migration of people that flooded up north, they were segregated into the urban areas of mostly downtown in those major cities, and what they call white flight. That's when the white people moved out to the suburbs, right? So this book right here, The Color of Law, talks about that. The color law, forgotten history of how our government segregated America. And when you look at the cover, it represents the areas where only black people could live and the areas that only white people could live, right? Even after segregation was so-called over, when you go to major cities now, you can see, even till this day, Chicago, Atlanta, you could go and you can see where this was a thing. This is not something fabricated and made up. This is a thing. You could go to major metropolitan areas right now, and even some smaller counties. You can see that. You can see where there are mostly black communities that's been there forever and a day, and you will see where those color lines are drawn. Now, because of gentrification and a lot of those areas, now that they have toned down a lot of the projects and those type of things in some of the major metropolitan areas, and have started to build these $1 million condos, because now they see this property as either waterfront and all this, or the proximity of it being downtown to major businesses and banks and all those type of things, you know, investment firms and all that type of stuff. So now they're looking at this property as a gold mine, and so they are pushing those same people that y'all pushed in. They're pushing them out. So these are the things that has plagued our wealth and has really and truly contributed to where we are today. So let's talk about some more of those. So look at the location and the mobility barriers. While the Housing Choice Voucher Program is supposed to give access to better neighborhoods, in reality, many landlords in wealthier or predominantly white neighborhoods refuse to accept the vouchers. Same thing I was saying. They're not going to rent to you in certain neighborhoods. So that limits where you can go. There are limited support for mobility counseling to help families move to higher opportunity areas, right? Black families are often concentrated in low income, segregated neighborhoods, reinforcing cycles of poverty and disinvestment. So in your radius of 20 miles or less, all you see is poverty, crime, violence, and all those different things within walking distance of where you live. And that's the only area that you are allowed to live in. And those are the only areas that takes these Section 8 vouchers and these other types of programs that they offer for housing with HUD. They are literally segregated to these areas. And so it makes it even worse when you're trying to get out, when you can't find someone to rent to you in a better neighborhood because of the stigma, as I was saying earlier, because of the stigma that the Section 8 voucher or the Section 8 participants have, that stigma of they're going to bring crime, they're going to bring drugs, they're going to bring all the undesirables to the neighborhood. And we don't want that. We don't want that kind of influence around our children and da-da-da-da-da. So that's where we go with that. And so there's no asset building incentives. Section 8 does not provide financial education, matched savings programs, or tools to help participants build credit, invest, or save. Without those tools, many participants, especially Black households affected by generational economic exclusion, remain financially stagnant. And the program stigma, here we go, and discrimination. Black voucher holders face more frequent discrimination in the rental market. Landlords may associate vouchers with race, poverty, unreliability, limiting housing choice. This often forces families to accept poor quality housing or remain in under-resourced communities. Long wait lists and time spent in the system. Many Black families spend years on waiting lists, and those who do receive assistance may remain on it indefinitely, often without pathways to exit the program with stability. That's what I was saying. You can't put me on this program as an economic benefit and don't give me the opportunity to get off of it. what is the path to get off of it? You're going to be checking that my income hasn't changed. And if it has changed, it still has to be under whatever your threshold is. So how can I make more money and do better for me and my children if you are constantly checking to make sure that I'm not? May that make sense? You don't want me on a program. You don't want me on these types of programs, welfare, getting SNAP benefits, whatever, but you don't want me to have the opportunity to do better. You don't want that either. So this creates a dynamic of dependence, not because recipients want it, but because the system doesn't incentivize or support transitioning out with wealth building tools. So there's a lack of integration with workforce development. Section 8 does not directly integrate with career training, education advancement, or entrepreneurship programs that could lift people out of poverty. Without this alignment, recipients often remain in low-wage jobs that prevent them from building wealth. So that's what I was talking about with the poverty trap. Do y'all see this as a poverty trap? I do. I really do. I don't see it as an economic benefit unless you are disabled, unless you are elderly and you're no longer able to work. And unfortunately, for a lot of the elderly that did work, a lot of their pensions got stole from them. They're barely getting by on Social Security benefits. And even now with this administration, that has came up in question. Is that going to be cut? So, and also Medicaid and Medicare benefits, they need that for what healthcare they can get, because you know our healthcare system is broken. But it's like, where do you go? What do you do? You're not setting me up for success. If I get on this program, you're not setting me up for success. I have been blessed that I never had to apply for Section 8. The most that I've ever had to get during the time of my child or me raising my child, I had to get EBT, SNAP benefit, not the SNAP with the where they give you a monthly stipend, but I got food stamps, and I had to get food stamps at one point, and my son was on Medicaid because my son was on Medicaid from the time he was born until he couldn't be on it any longer because it was too expensive for me to carry him, even though I had a job to carry him on my insurance. Like it was eating up. It would ate up the majority of my check for me to have insurance and for me to provide insurance for him. So our insurance is too expensive. It's so many things that as a single parent that counts against us when we're trying to do the right thing. So I also asked ChatGPT this too. I said, what about the impact on the Black families that limits the presence of the husband/father residing in the household? So a lot of the people that you know, and you know this to be true, in order for you to even be on Section 8, 99% of the people that are there, they are single family females with their kids trying to raise their children on their own. Regardless if the husband left them, father left them, or if the father does want to be a part of their life, they're not allowed to live in the same house with them because now you made too much money or whatever the case may be. Now, let's talk about that because there was time, especially back when this became into existence, that a Black man could work 40 plus hours and would barely bring home $60 a week. Barely would bring home $40 a week, and they would work their fingers to the bone, and there was no freaking way that they could take care of their families. And mind you now, the families was a lot bigger back then, a lot bigger. I'm talking about 5 and 6 children, 7, 8 children under one house, and one apartment might have been just 2 bedrooms, and all those kids, you know. So I will say now that families are smaller now. Not saying all, but they're a lot smaller than they were back then. And so let's talk about that. One of the most critical overlooked consequences of Section 8 and other low-income housing assistance program is how certain rules and income requirements indirectly discourage the presence of husbands or fathers in the household, particularly for Black families. And here's how that happens. Number one, household income rules penalize two-parent households. Section 8 calculates rent and eligibility based on total household incomes, not individual income. If a husband or a father is added to the lease or moves in, even if he's working low-wage jobs, the household income rises, which increases the rent portion paid by the family, may disqualify the household entirely from assistance, and 9 times out of 10, the husband is not making enough money, especially back in those times of the 70s and the 80s and all that. And we're not talking about 2025 because there's I can't say we have got a lot of more economic progress since then. And so the result, many families avoid officially adding fathers to the lease to preserve eligibility, which creates a separation between economic support and household unity. Fear of losing benefits. Number 2, a low-income father moving in may push the family just over the income limit, even if he's not earning much. That's what I was saying. He might not even be earning that much, not even enough to even take care of his wife and his kids, let alone pay the full rent. It's a full-time job trying to keep those mouths fed and try to keeping them clothing, especially if you live up north where you get harsh winters and you're trying to make sure all of them got a coat or shoes that they're not walking on the ground almost barefooted, so that they have warm clothes and a warm meal. And so a low-income father moving in may push the family just over the income limit, even if he's not earning much. This has led to what some scholars call marriage penalty or cohabitation penalty in housing assistance. Families often make a heartbreaking decision, either maintain housing security or include both parents in the home. Fathers often left off the lease. Number 3, to keep benefits, many fathers live off lease. They stay with family unofficially or are forced to live elsewhere. This limits the father's legal presence, ability to help raise the children under the same roof, or even visit frequently without risking sanctions. They always talk about the black family, the broken homes of the black family. But you have to think about it. Coming out of Jim Crow era, coming into what's supposed to be the most prosperous America was, that did not reach the black and brown community. And so even when a lot of the men were trying to be the fathers they could be, they were pushed out. And so that's why you see so many of my mother was single, my grandmother was single, my aunt was single, those type of things, that continue to pass down into our families as well, because trying to get the housing assistance, trying to get whatever assistance that you could get because you still don't make enough money to do better. And so that becomes a strain on the black family structure. These policies unintentionally contribute to the disruption of black family units, creates tension around hiding dad from housing authorities, undermines efforts towards stability, marriage, and financial co-planning, reinforces the false narrative of absent black fathers, when in reality, many are deliberately excluded from the home to protect the family's housing. Number 5, long-term impact on children. Children miss out on the day-to-day presence of both parents, not because of family dysfunction, but because of economic rules. This has psychological, emotional development efforts, all while contributing to intergenerational poverty cycles. That's why I can't not say that this does not turn into a poverty trap. And number 6, since the majority of Section 8 recipients are black single mothers, the structure of the program puts women in the position of primary financial manager under strict limitations, while discouraging male partners from fully participating. So this has by far, especially back in the day, has attributed to the breakdown of the black family. Do you know that in the turn of the decade in the 1950s, there was more black marriages than there were white marriages? Yeah, there was. And that was the start, because I don't want you to think that housing just started in the 70s. Housing has been around, but it was not for us. There has been housing assistance. A lot of the so-called projects and ghettos and stuff like that, they were mostly white people in those homes, in those main areas, because that's where the white flight came about, where they moved out to the suburbs, and we were segregated into the inner cities. And so they called that urban renewal. the urban renewal thing that went on around that time. So it has never helped us in the form of helping us with economic prosperity. I feel like it was one of those things, and still is one of those things, if you're not educated to know, or got the financial literacy to know, that it's one of those things where it is a disguise to me as an economic benefit, when it really is a poverty trap for your family. Because if you can't make more money, and if it's not incentives for you to graduate off of those programs to be able to be sustaining, to be able to afford housing for yourself, then this is not helping. Now, do I think that they should only give able-bodied people 2 years to get right? I wouldn't say that 2 years is enough time, because in the end, it depends on where you live, because the cost of living is different per state. You know, you go to New York, the cost of living in New York is a lot higher than it is here in South Carolina. Same thing for people that live in California, Hawaii, even people that live out there in Arizona. Same thing, Texas. So it depends on where you live. 2 years may not be enough. 2 years comes really fast. And if you're going to be checking their income while you're in this 2 years, you're not giving them an opportunity to do better. You're not. So I feel like if you're going to want to propose that, you have to put things in place to help them get there. Don't check their income for 2 years. Don't check who is in their house and who's contributing, if they got married, or whatever. Because if you want to get people to a better economic situation, well, you got to help those people get there. You got to give them the incentive to want to get there. Because if I'm going to still be able to get the Section 8 voucher where my rent is under $100, and I can't make the amount so that I can pay full rent in whatever city that I live in, then I'm going to continue to not do well. I mean, that's just the reality of the thing. So this is my last point, and I asked ChatGPT, how has it contributed to other generations in the same family also being on that system? And so it says, 1, lack of wealth building opportunities, no economic progression, like we just said. Section 8 provides rental assistance, but not equity or asset accumulation. Because families aren't building home equity or growing savings, there's little generational wealth passed on. Children raised in households without financial growth often start adulthood at the same or lower economic level as their parents. Number 2, modeling a dependency as normal. Children growing up in Section 8 household often see the program as a necessary part of adult survival. Without exposure to wealth building tools, credit education, investing, entrepreneurship, housing assistance become normalized as the only path. This is especially true if schools in those neighborhoods also lack resources to expose students to broader opportunities. All right. Fear of losing stability equal risk avoidance. Families on Section 8 often avoid taking financial risks, starting a business, changing careers, or moving in higher cost areas because doing so could jeopardize housing stability. That risk aversion is passed down. Children are taught to play it safe, stay on assistance, and not mess up the system. Instead of planning for advancement, they plan for survival. Geographic entrapment. How many voucher recipients are concentrated in under-resourced neighborhoods? Without mobility support like counseling or funding to move, families stay in the same communities for generations. This leads to generational exposure to poverty, crime, underfunded schools, and limited social capital, reinforcing the cycle. And you got to understand, guys, that the best schools, they're paid by property taxes. So if you're when you go to these crime field areas and stuff like that they have segregated people that's on Section 8, they have the worst schools. They have the low resources for the schools. And so because there's nobody buying homes there that are attributed to the property tax to make the schools better. All right. Number 5, missed financial education. Section 8 doesn't include built-in financial education or goal-setting services. Without that guidance, families often stay in the system indefinitely without ever learning how to improve credit, save for a home, invest for the future, increase income. The lack of financial literacy is then passed down to the next generation. I can't talk enough about how important it is for financial literacy to be taught in the schools. Adult financial literacy is so important because a lot of us are not getting this information until we're well into our 40s, 50s, and 60s as Black people. When this information should be taught to them while they're in elementary school. They need to be learning how to save when they are young. So by the time they're 17, 18 years old and they graduate, they have a concept before they even think about going to college and getting in student loan debt and all that kind of jazz. All this information needs to be taught early on. And in 2025, in my opinion, there's no excuse. Okay, so number 6, public policy gaps. Programs like Family Self-Sufficiency, FSS, are designed to help people transition off assistance, but they're optional, not required, underfunded, and underpromoted, not always effective without strong case management. Without intentional policies to break the cycle, families get stuck. Social reinforcement and stereotypes. Extended families and peer networks often consist of others on assistance, creating a closed feedback loop. Young adults may feel less pressure or inspiration to lead the program because everyone is doing it, or they fear leaving and struggling more. So it's one of those things, and even ChatGPT said real life cycle example. It says grandmother enters Section 8 after divorce or job loss. Her daughter grows up seeing that lifestyle as stable and safe and applies when she becomes a parent. The granddaughter follows suit. Now 3 generations have used housing assistance without ownership, upward mobility, or wealth transfer. So again, I ask you guys, do you see this as an economic benefit? After I done laid out all these different points, do you see this as an economic benefit for the Black and brown community over the years, over these decades of its inception, or do you see it as a poverty trap? Please leave me your comment and let me know your thoughts and your feels on here. And again, I'm hoping that this podcast, now that I've moved, as you see, I moved an hour away from where I was at into Greenville, South Carolina. So now I'll be able to bring more videos and create more episodes with the Happy and Healed Money podcast. So I do want your feedback on this topic, and let me know, what do you think? It's very important that we have these conversations. Again, if you have any other questions that you want to ask me, you could go to my website, starcarter.com, and you can send me a message. It comes to my phone. You can do that, or you can email me too at starrknowscredit@gmail.com, and Starr does have 2 R's in it. Okay, again, I appreciate you. I hope you all are blessed and prosperous, and again, I want you guys to let's learn this financial literacy together. And I'm going to see you guys in the next podcast. I can't talk. I will see you guys in the next podcast episode and also in the next video. Thank you.